Hey everyone, welcome to the Bible Tea Podcast. We're here to spill the tea, all the juicy details, the weird bits, and all the messy parts of Bible stories. This season, we're tackling a subject that is as old as the Garden of Eden. That's right, we're talking about sex in the Bible. And in today's episode, we're talking about Esther. And I am so excited for this conversation, for this discussion, because I have as my guest my wonderful friend, Alma Cardenas-Rodriguez. She's a Mexico Estadounidense, born, raised, and living in the San Francisco Valley of Los Angeles, California. She is the daughter of Teresa and Alberto, who migrated from the Sierras of the Durango and Jalisco Mexico states. And she comes from a lineage of stubborn, resistant, creative, and intuitive women, but also from her father's side, specifically corn and bean cultivators and beekeepers. I love that. I love bees so much. And I love that that comes from your family.
Yay!
Alma is a mother, wife, mentor, poet, and published author, passionate about creating spaces where women and young adults of color can tap into the well of stories and powerful voices that they carry within through journaling and sensory practices for their healing and for our collective well-being. Alma, welcome, my
Yay!
friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I just realized, wow, like our bios are so long, but it couldn't be without all of those parts.
Yeah, there's such a dynamism and like a richness to our
Mhm.
lives. And I'm wondering, is there anything from all of that richness that you're bringing to the world that you want to share a little bit more about? Like,
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for introducing me and for having me here. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you today. And yes, I'm a Mexico Estadounidense, born, raised, and living in the San Fernando Valley. And I'll share a story about something I found out more recently. So I've always known that my mom is from the Sierras of Durango, from which at some point in history paper was made, um, and because of the pine trees forest that are born and that have grown there for many, many years. But then recently I found out that from where my dad is from, he was also born and raised in the Sierras, but of Jalisco, where there's pine trees, but it's also known for encinos or oak trees. And it's interesting because from those oak trees at some point in history, the indigenous communities would draw this like ink-like substance for like rituals or ceremonial practices. And that was powerful for me to learn because it's, in essence, my parents come from a place from where like paper and ink come from, which affirms like my purpose and one of my passions, which is to write and to tell stories. So um yeah, so that's been really beautiful to learn these last couple weeks. Basically, I learned about that.
wow, that's amazing. And you know what I love that whenever we catch up and we talk to each other, we're like, oh my gosh, I learned this new thing about my ancestry, or like there's this thing that I'm learning about indigenous practices or something like
Yeah.
that. And so it's just been a really great journey to have you as a companion in that journey as well.
Yes, yes, same, likewise. I love it's yeah, it's always beautiful and affirming and life-giving to share these stories with one another.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into it.
Uh-huh. Yes, let's
And
get into
I'm gonna give a
it.
little bit of context for everyone.
Okay.
So our story takes place in around 479 BCE in Persia. And this is about 100 years after the Israelites have been in exile. So the Babylonian exile, if you all remember hearing that in Sunday school at some time, it's been 100 years since that. So basically what happened was that the Israelites kind of broke off into a lot of little groups. They became diasporas. And some returned to Jerusalem, but some didn't. And one of these groups that did not return is in Persia, and this is where we have our story taking place with Hadassah, aka
Mhm.
Esther, and
Esther.
Mordecai. And curiously, this is just a random fact. This doesn't have anything or not much to do with maybe with what we're going to talk about today, but Esther's the only book in the Bible that doesn't actually mention Yahweh or just
Mm.
God in any way. It's really interesting to look for signs of God. But also for me, I think it affirms a way of spirituality. When we're not always like saying all the sayings that make us religious.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
All the Christianese, okay?
Yes, exactly.
All right, so here is the story. So
Mhm.
the king of Persia, there was a feast to display his greatness. All right. So there's all kinds of drinking. There's all these like very powerful people. He has like these guys, right? These men that are like his group of like close people that help him run the country or like the empire.
Mhm.
So they're kind of like, hey, you should call the queen. She's so beautiful. He's like, yes, I should. This king is like so lame, y'all. Like he lets himself be influenced so easily. So the king's like, yes, like someone bring Vashti. I want everyone to see how beautiful she is. And here is one of the baddest bosses in like the Bible. Okay.
Yes. And she
So
said, hell no.
yeah, she's like, excuse you.
Yeah.
No. We're not doing
Uh-huh.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could only imagine why, right? Because having to be in a room as like this object for everyone's like viewing and probably who knows what other pleasures. I don't know. But yeah, ugh. No más de pensar me da
Yeah.
chills and asco all at the same time.
The egg, as the youngins
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So the king gets the message, right? Vashti is not coming. She said
Mm-hmm.
no. So then his guys are like, oh, you're going to let her talk to you like that? You're going to
Mm-hmm.
let her disrespect you? And no. You need to do something about that. So what happens? We're not entirely sure. The Bible's very vague,
Mm-hmm.
but she might either be banished or executed. Okay, we don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
Whatever the Persian king decided, she's no longer queen, and we don't know if she's still alive or not.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens? He needs a new queen, right? So the king has his people organize a quote unquote beauty pageant.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I've heard that story told
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, but essentially what is happening is the Israelites, the Jews, are in a country that is not their own. They are basically have been conquered and they don't have a say in what goes on. So these girls, teenage girls, are taken from their homes by force
Mm-hmm.
to become the king's playthings.
Mm.
And something that I've seen in like that movie or like so many movies that have been made about Esther is that like the eunuch like really protects her and helps her to like be the chosen one. Yep. But when I hear eunuch, it's like AKA manager of the king's harem, basically.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So he is the one that is managing the king's women who are obviously not treated with respect because look at what happened to Vashti, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how different is the treatment going to be for Esther? Esther, aka Hadassah, and her cousin, who adopted her as a child, Mordecai, they kind of like make a plot, or like that's where they become more prominent in the story. And this is where all the plots and all the schemes start happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a plot to kill the king, and Mordecai hears about it. And then there's a plot from Haman, who's this other character, to kill all the Jews. And then there's plots by Esther and Mordecai to like save all the Jews, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all of
Yep.
the things start happening.
Yeah. And that's the
Rising
thing
action.
and that's the thing that was put on a pedestal for us, that like passage in Esther 4:14, where like if you don't speak for such a time as this, like you were put in this royal position for such a time as this. And if you don't, like it'll come from somewhere else. And that's the part that was like highlighted for us consistently growing up.
The part of what you're mentioning is also that she says like, well, if I die, I die. I understand that. And still that is so much to ask
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
of someone. So yeah, let me know, Alma, like what does this bring up for you? What is it that you are like, about this story?
Yes. There's a, yeah, and just rereading it again these last couple of weeks has brought up so much for me. One of the things that it brought up immediately was Sergio, my husband, and I have been married for 13 years. But a couple months into our relationship, I had a moment where I just started crying at work every single day, because I knew that there was some things that I hadn't shared. I asked for his consent to share this story because it's both of our stories. But the reason why I was crying and struggling that week was because I knew it was getting serious with Sergio, but I also knew that Sergio was a youth pastor, and I also knew that I was in a virgin. So I knew that if this relationship was going to go forward, I was going to have to come clean with like who I was. And then I started thinking about what the heck like drew me to that place to feel that way and to think of myself in that way and to in many ways feel less than to be in a relationship with a youth pastor because of this reality. And then as it turns out, like, I did share it with Sergio and he didn't freak out and he affirmed me. And, in my mind, I thought things, if he did stay with me, things would change forever or that he would break up with me, because that was how it unfolded for a lot of other people and a lot of other friends that I had known. But it was a total opposite. Like he didn't freak out. He wasn't scared. Things continued like, we talked about it and then things continued. He didn't treat me any different. So I knew even in like our conservative upbringings that there was something different about Sergio and that we would be okay. But this led me to remember that this passage was taught to us and highlighted like that we needed to prepare that if we were ever going to have like this economic stability, like we needed to be virgins and it would come through, being married or partnership with a man. But the parts not often said that I later found was that Esther was in this royal position at the expense of a woman's downfall, of the Queen Vashti for having made a choice for herself, but also at the expense of her identity. Tuvo que cambiarse su nombre. She had to change her name. She probably had to let go of a lot of practices and rituals, and her community for, being in the space. But also like what grossed me out, and made me wonder a lot was the fact that Mordecai took her to this palace. And I wonder if it was her choice, like, like cómo se sintió ella, like how did she feel? Was it her choice? And so from a young age, we were encouraged to hold firm these purity ideals and to be obedient and to wait for sexual intercourse until marriage and to guard and prepare ourselves with our image, our wardrobe in ways that did not call attention or bring any sexual desire or distraction to boys or males in the church. Like, I don't know if I've shared this story with you or maybe I have, but we had fondo checks at church. Like they would, they would make,
No.
when anything looked a little see-through, like we would be taken up to this like room with the diaconas and they would make sure we were wearing a fondo.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And we couldn't wear things like toe polish if we were going to be doing a reading or singing from the altar. And when I say altar, I don't even mean like where the pulpit was. It was like at the bottom of the stairs of the altar because we weren't allowed to go there. We were policed, we were body shamed, and fat phobia was a big thing too. I've always been curvier. So when I left church the first time and came the second time around, the girls who were skinny and wearing tight and short things, like they got away with it and they were able to participate in, like the church service, like without being reprimanded. But those of us who were wearing similar things were actually discouraged from participating and discouraged from wearing what we were wearing and asked to wear more appropriate things in the context of the service, especially if we were to participate. And as a kid, even like in our culture, a cada rato, like if I was sitting with my legs open, cierra las piernas, close your legs. If we were having dinner at the table, like women were not encouraged to have a second round, while like our brother siblings were encouraged to have a second and a third plate if they wanted to. So I feel like everything around us, like for Esther, invited us to disconnect from ourselves, from our bodies, from our own desires, from our own pleasures, and prepared us to serve everyone else but ourselves, but also like that partner or person that we would one day marry. And for some reason, the interesting part was that all this checklist of things that we needed to follow would keep us away from harm in ways that they didn't, because at the end of the day, we followed all the rules and we marked all the boxes, but yet we still have stories of church too and meat too as a result from this. And the most exhausting and annoying and sad part is that a lot of the leaderships and the people like forcing this on us and encouraging this on us were not even living this out themselves. Their
Oh,
families weren't even living this out themselves. And in over the years, we've all heard the church to Me Too stories come out,
yeah.
and the hidden or forced abortion stories that continue to come out to light, not as a way of like judging them, because hey, your body, your rules, but as a way of like making us realize, is this really the way to go? Is this really how we treat and engage with a body made in the image of God? That's a little bit of what comes up for me, but also like thinking about me at Fuller Youth Institute in 2013 and hearing Irene Cho say, Esther was a sex worker. And I was like, what? I was like, and that was so new to me. And I was like, what? And anytime Irene said something, like it was like powerful, it was thought provoking, and it made me go back home to like, go look it up and learn about it. And then I remember that's when I came across the word concubine for the first time, because before then I had never heard that part. It had never been taught to us. And concubine in essence is like someone who's there for the pleasure and the service of the king.
And not just like serving him food, it's like a specifically sexual service.
Exactly, So I was like, whoa. And, and that just made me realize, so, I mean, I admire Esther so much more. I don't regret naming my oldest daughter Esther, like as a result of this. Like, on the contrary, like I admire her even more. But then now I think about Esther and Abby, right? Like, and how I want to preparing not for a moment or a wedding day, but that encourages them to not have to give up their identity or purpose or body pleasure and choice, like in some ways, like Esther, I feel that Esther was, and in the ways that we were. What would it look like to encourage them to connect with themselves in those ways before anyone or anything else, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And wow, you've just shared so much that
Yeah.
like like so many like things for me. But one of the things that you mentioned was the not the symptoms, but the causes. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
hearing a lot about like why are young people leaving the church? And you mentioned, right, you left church once, you came back, and then you've left a
Mm-hmm.
second time. And I think maybe people who are watching or listening might feel like they're in this camp that we're kind of like church adjacent or like Christian adjacent, because we're still holding on to our Christianity, but are trying to heal it in some ways, or are trying to heal the way we see ourselves in relation to God and in relation to one another, and how we see not just ourselves as in like our soul, but ourselves as in all of ourselves, as you said, our body, our personalities, our fears, our emotions, all of these things. And you named several of the reasons why some of us have had to step away, like to take a step back in order for us to heal or just feel safe and not feel triggered. Because as you mentioned, like so many of the things, the purity culture, the judging, the really strict legalistic ways of policing women's bodies in churches, of abusing women in a sense of using them for a lot of the work at church. Like if you if you go to any church, especially any Latino church, the people that are actually doing a lot of the work behind the scenes are women, are
Yep.
the hermanas, and some of them are already old, but they're doing this because like they're doing this for God, and that's great. But also like men can do work too, young people. This should be an intergenerational thing. And another part of what you mentioned there is that the sad part is also, and this is something that is not just about the duplicitousness of like saying one thing and doing another, like in one's family, but also like patriarchy in general is often passed down by the mothers or by women who are teaching young women to be a certain way, and then turning around and like serving their sons and their husbands and not letting them actually learn to fend for themselves or just like be
Yeah.
decent human beings.
Yeah.
But depending on women to para hacerles las cosas, you know?
See, this all came up for me. I don't know if it was like a year or two ago that Sergio got the opportunity to um be the officiant to a quinceañera. And I remember one of the things that he was asked to do was that purity ring.
Mm-hmm.
Y yo no sabía.
Mm-hmm.
So as we were going through the ceremony and he, you know, he was doing the whole like written thing that they had given him for the purity ring. I was cringing the whole time and I said no. Like like Sergio and I had a conversation and I was like, Nunca jamás, like we could never say yes to contributing or being a part of something like that. But then I also thought of my own daughters, like how am I gonna tell them the countercultural healing version of like the purity culture that we received? And so like in my family, like I know the quinceañeras are coming up in like 2 years, which is a whole other story that I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna go down, but
Yeah,
I
two
have given them,
teenagers at home.
yeah, I have given them that option and they, you know, they do, we'll have to make that choice sooner than later because we gotta save up. But what that meant for me, that woke me up to realize, okay, like how can I change, even just start with like my language, right? So for example, you know, a lot of the times I would hear us saying, you know, when you get married or when you have children, but now I'm so intentional with Esther and Abby about saying like, if you get married, if you decide to have children, and even there, like I use the word instead of like saying husband, I say partner because I don't know, you know, I don't know. Um, and so, and even when it comes to clothes, like my clothes was chosen for me. Even when I started working at 13 and I started buying my own things, like things would disappear from my closet if they were too short or, you know, too crop or whatever.
Yeah.
But now, like when I'm shopping with my girls and when they're asking me, oh, what should I wear today? I just say, wear whatever makes you happy. Like wear whatever makes you comfortable. Like I don't, you know, which is something that I never heard growing up. And I was just talking to someone about this over the weekend. Like if you ever come to my house, I don't have any wedding pictures up. I don't have any wedding pictures up, even though it was a beautiful day and we looked pretty fabulous. Like I hadn't even, yeah, even on my IG, I realized I didn't have any wedding pictures up until recently that we had our 13-year anniversary, because I feel like I don't want to push this moment or this image of what like partnership and commitment looks like to my daughters, if that's even something that they end up deciding to do on their own. Because in my mind, like my daily interactions with Sergio are more of a resemblance and an embodiment of what partnership and commitment looks like, because the picture is just a piece of the puzzle, and in many times it's like a shallow piece of puzzle, as I now realize. So little things like that I try to be intentional about to hopefully encourage something different. And I don't know. And we'll see how it all turns out. I don't know if it's going to help, but those are the little things that I'm trying on my end to create a space where they're more attuned with themselves.
And I so appreciate what you are doing. And I'm not a parent, but I can't imagine how hard it is to be so responsible for these individuals, but then also at the same time hold the tension of letting them develop to be who they are and not influencing them too much, but caring for them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hear that. This last weekend, we were talking with my sister about how, like, yeah, up until the age or even older from Esther and Abby, you know, we were wearing matching outfits and we had no choice. And Esther and Abby will not wear matching outfits anymore. So yeah, and it's interesting. And yeah, and what you're saying, that now that I'm older, I mean, I wear shorter than I used to things and I get the dirty looks from my mom, but I'm okay. I'm gonna wear this, mom.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wear this, mom.
No me importa.
I love you, but I'm gonna wear this.
Yeah. La otra
And
cosa, the other thing that you mentioned too was like you say if you get married, if you have kids. I think that's great because when we say like when you get married, it's kind of like all those fairy tales, right? Where it's like, oh, they got married and live happily ever after. Like that's the end of the story. Like that's the point of life, to get married.
Mm-hmm.
And as my brother, who's younger than me, I'm the oldest, as my brother has gotten
Mm-hmm.
married and my other sister, who's also younger
Sister.
than me, has gotten married, there's more questions, right? Of like, when are you going to
Mm.
get married? Or how
Mm.
many kids are you going to have? And I don't want to have kids. I have other plans. I have other things I want to do with my life.
Yes.
I've decided that marriage is not a goal in life,
Mm-hmm.
specifically also for women. And so, like, I've heard, like, oh, but once you have kids, like, your attitude changes, or
Mm.
once you have kids, like, you already have them, your life has to adjust.
Mm.
And for me, it's like, well, if I have the choice
Mm.
to not have the kids, I'm going to
Yes.
choose not to. And I'm so happy for other people that do have kids. I have a nephew
Mm-hmm.
and a niece, and I love them. It's not that I don't love children, I really do. And I really
Mm.
enjoy children, but it's not something that I want for my future.
Yes. Yes, you go, girl. And I'm sorry for all the times that you get pushback on that. You go, girl. We're supporting you with that and all of your, yeah, your goals and dreams. And that's why, like, I think too, one of the poems in the book that I published in 2020, Groanings from the Desert, is titled Wedding Day.
Mm.
And that was a moment where I gave myself permission to write vows to myself. Um,
Oh.
and I think that's another thing that when I think about my daughters and the generations growing and the ones to come, it's like, yeah, you know, and if you decide to get married and have children, that's beautiful. That's a commitment that you'll make. But before that, like, what have you wrote vows to yourself? What are your, you know, what is your vision? What are your goals? What are your the boundaries that you're going to place on yourself? That's another thing that I am encouraging people to do is don't wait until a moment like that to write vows to a partner. Like, what would some vows to yourself look like
Mm-hmm.
today? I could assure you something beautiful will come out of that for you because it came out for me. And every time I'm in a moment where, like, I feel like I want to repeat a pattern of something that I learned
Mm.
growing up, like, I
Yeah.
come back to that and I'm like, no, no voy a volver ahí otra vez. And it's just like a consistent reminder of where you're not going to go anymore and where you're looking for it to be.
That's awesome. That is such a great, not just personal practice, it's also a great spiritual practice. And it's also a
Mm-hmm.
great psychological practice, because there
Mm-hmm.
is this practice of the if and then, like, if something doesn't go the way that you want, how are you going to pivot or cope? That's really great and practical for
¿Te lo
everyone
puedo
to do.
leer?
Yeah.
I'm going to read it to you. It's titled Wedding Day. I am my own flower girl. Yellow, red, pink, orange, and green petals, the way of a path which I have decided for me. The path leads to an altar where I will say yes to my dreams and gifts, to learning and holding the imperfections of the history of my community and culture, which weave me. It is not picture perfect. Creation are my guests and witnesses. For the first time in my life, I am owning my strengths, art, and beliefs, even when they are constantly shut down for being idealistic and too unreal to be. The altar, a crossroads of my life, where I will commit not to one man or partner, my vows are to me by me. I promise to love you in success and in failures, in sickness and in health, to receive every blessing just as you have given, to be a voice of justice to the injustice we have endured together, to embrace the different phases of yourself in size 10, 12, 14, or 16, to strive towards what brings us equity of wealth and health, to celebrate without regret every single victory, and to mourn in times of loss without holding your volume down, to be a voice of affirmation that blurs any sounds of condemnation. And as you serve your family, friends, and comunidad, don't ever again forget about you. That too is serving God. Dressed in a rebozo and equally proud in my skinny jeans, at 36, now 39 years old, when some would say, you are too old, ya se te pasó el tren, this is my wedding day, a commitment and perfect timing to me, my rendition of happily ever after, my American dream. Oh.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I had to go back to it last week. I was like, oh no. But no, yeah.
I love that. And part of what I also want this podcast to be for us, and for people that are like us is a healing space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really like why we're talking about these stories in the Bible, why we're
Mm,
talking about them like they're gossip, because there's a lot of interesting things in them, but also the way that they were told to or taught to us, and
yeah.
the implications of that were not always good.
Yeah.
And we're here to let others know, like, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of us who have had a lot of really great experiences in the church, and also really hurtful experiences. I just love that message that you're bringing of loving ourselves and making vows to ourselves in the good or in the bad, and sickness and health, or whatever size we are, whatever is
Yeah.
going on. Loving ourselves is one of the greatest commandments, right? Love God,
Yeah.
and then love yourself and love your neighbor. And so, at least speaking for myself, that's not something that
Mm-hmm.
I heard often at church, and it wasn't really practiced. And bring it back to like how women are told to be. Women are taught to love others more than themselves. You have to pour into your own cup first before you
Mm-hmm.
pour into someone else's. That's what your vows are to yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
I love myself, I'm gonna keep my cup full, and that's how I can help others. But if I'm like running myself ragged over helping other people and over trying to uphold this way of being, and just, yeah, spending my time and my energy on things that are not love, then it's gonna hurt us at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and I don't know if I said this before, but even just thinking about Esther, like I admire her so much more because she was a community organizer. She
Mm.
was an advocate, in many ways, like she wrote policy in ways that
Mm-hmm.
saved from her community from sure genocide, or helped save her community from sure genocide. But that was the only story that we were told. So even just going forward, like giving ourselves permission to share all the parts of our story
Mm.
as beautiful, as something worthy of celebrating, and yeah,
Just
and not,
recognizing and acknowledging the power of what women do.
yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes. And I'm just on that journey to understand that for myself and our girls and our youth and young adults growing up, so that they'll grow up loving their body more than they grew up hating it in many ways, like some of us did. And still this day are uncomfortable with, like in so
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good place for us to wrap up.
Okay.
Folks, that's all the tea we have for you and Esther
Yes.
today. But we do have one question that we use to wrap up our episodes, and that is,
Mhm.
what tea are you drinking today?
I'm drinking té de hoja de guayaba,
Okay.
guayaba tree leaf tea,
Uh,
and it's one of the teas that my mom encourages to drink, especially that is an anti-inflammatory, but also when you're experiencing a lot of bloating and water retention in your
mhm,
body.
mhm.
Um, it's meant to just help you release some of the water. But also when we were little, guayaba, whenever we got sick, jugo de guayaba. Jugo de
Oh, okay.
guayaba was in the pantry ready for us to drink. So it's childhood memory too.
Oh, okay. So I am
Yeah.
drinking té de canela, cinnamon
Ah,
tea.
okay.
And there's kind of been a bug going around, like a stomach bug. And
Uh-huh.
I yesterday was kind of feeling like I might feel a little sick, but I'm still I'm still okay. But cinnamon settles your stomach. So whenever if someone's
Oh.
like feeling like their stomach is not feeling well,
Mm-hmm.
cinnamon will help with that. And
Mm.
here's a little story about cinnamon tea, which is also a childhood thing for me,
Okay.
because when we were small and we felt sick, my mom would
Mm-hmm.
make us like atole de canela, which is cinnamon
Mm.
tea, but you
Mm-hmm.
put like a handful of rice in it. And
Mm-hmm.
so the rice kind of like cooks in the tea. And so
Mm-hmm.
you drink the tea and then you get a little bit of cooked rice in the tea, and with maybe a little bit of sugar. So that was
Oh.
like also for, like when we're like a comforting drink for us to have when we
Mm.
were feeling sick.
I love
Yeah.
that. I had never heard of that atole de canela, but it almost sounds like arroz con leche, but instead of leche, it's water.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah,
And
because
do you have to moler el arroz when you drink it, or así te lo tomas?
así te lo tomas, yeah. You just
Oh,
drink it.
okay.
Because it kind of like, it cooks all the way where it kind of does the little star thing where the ends like
Mm-hmm.
split open. So it's just
Oh,
a really soft, light carbohydrate for your stomach to
stomach.
like be able
Mm,
to settle with.
yes.
Yes, the things we learn in childhood.
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to remember all those and write them down, or ask my mom to write them down. I'm doing that a lot lately, writing things down for my mom and my dad. But no, thank you so much. This has been a beautiful conversation, and it's a joy and a privilege to, yeah, to be in this space with you. You're amazing, and I admire you so much. So thank you.
Thank you, and same. Yes, I'm so happy, and I feel really grateful that we get to be in each other's lives, and that we get to like support one another and encourage one another and inspire one another, and go on adventures together sometimes.
Yes, see you in New York.
Yeah.
Oh my God. No, yeah,
All
this
right.
is awesome. Thank you,
That's
mujer.
it for today, everyone. But there's always more to learn and more to discuss when it comes to Bible stories. So head over to the comment section below and share your thoughts on today's episode. What do you think about Esther? What do you think about Mordecai? What do you think about like all the schmexual things that this story actually has that we were never told? Did anything challenge you or spark a curiosity? I want to hear from you. Let us know, and be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, that notification bell, and to stay up to date with all of the Bible tea. And yeah, share this podcast with your friends. The more the merrier, especially when we're spilling the tea on the Bible. All right. So thanks for watching or listening. Until next time.